Drones are in debate these days. You don't have to look very far. When you look across in your house, on the television, you see the war across the world and the way the drones are shaping the war today's latest in the Russia and Ukraine conflict. If you go back a little, you see the Armenia conflict. So drones have multiple applications. It has a military applications, also have a civilian applications. But here today we're talking about the military, and to talk about their varied definitions and roles and challenges in India, we have a distinguished expert sitting with us. I begin with Rohan Verma. He's the CEO and Executive Director, Map My India. He's India's leading digital maps and location technology company. He has been pioneer in navigation in India, which is a homegrown company. We have Ramakrishna. He's the founder and CEO of Endure Air, a IIT Kanpur-led initiative, and his drones are already inducted in the Indian Army and posted somewhere at our border locations across Jammu and Kashmir. We have a drone pioneer from India, from the Indian Air Force, a veteran of Indian Air Force Group Captain Siddharth Maurya. He is also a senior DGM at Larsen and Toubro, of course, Indian defense company. Uh, so we begin by asking to Rohan, uh, can we define the roles of drones in India in military per se and the civilian per se? The basic definitions, how they differ.
I guess from my perspective, and I think my fellow panelists will add much more color, um, in defense or military perspective, one side is defensive and one side is offensive, where basically it's to do with security, sovereignty, law enforcement, and also ensuring that nothing untoward happens towards the safety and security of the country. So, from that perspective, whether it's surveillance to monitor what's happening, to whether it's even logistics to make sure that military kind of essential equipment can be transported, even mapping because you want to be able to do a recce and get information about different areas, whether inside border or outside border. So, in my limited understanding, those would be the different defense or military applications. On the civilian side, of course, there are infinite use cases. So whether it is for in what the government is doing for giving property card to the rural people, for giving them their property location or mapping, the Somitva cards which are being talked about, or for urban digital twins for urban planning to make offers even solar kind of inspection, solar panels, or of the telecom towers or oil and gas. I mean, you can, of course, we are talking about delivery, whether for emergency response or middle mile delivery of goods. So again, surveillance, survey and mapping, your logistics, then agriculture, very very large use case around kind of pesticide or fertilizer spraying, automating and doing precision agriculture. So yeah, there are infinite use cases for drones. That's what's exciting. And yeah, you rightly said categorized into kind of military and civilian use cases.
Group Captain, your perspective, since it's been almost 2-3 decades when drones are in debate, and every armed forces across the world are trying to acquire the latest of the drones technology. They see the rule of the games are changing, the warfare are changing. Basically, we are still trying to do catch up with the world, with the best of the technology available across the world, and especially in the context of China, we see have taken ahead in their component, also in the artificial intelligence, which goes into making of the drone. Where do you see we stand in terms of the military drones and our capability? If you get an overall perspective of drones from the armed forces perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Manisha. I think uh, before I answer that part, it is important to understand how we have reached to the present stage, how and where we started. So it all started somewhere post Kargil, when the Kargil conflict happened, and in post Kargil review committee meeting, which the committee which discovered certain lacunas, I will say some gaps in the intelligence gathering mechanism, and from there the need for better platforms to cover intelligence was found. And that's how the UAV stepped into the military role in the Indian subcontinent, especially I'm talking with respect to India. So since 99, we have been on this journey of unmanned aviation, which began in 99. Indian Army was the first in 99, and followed by Air Force in 2000, and then Navy in 2001. And since then, we have continued to add to the inventory of the type of aircraft, type of sensors, upgrades, better versions, a lot of newer models of aircraft and platforms have been added. And I think it's a trajectory where we are still continuing on the growth path. So what you are referring to as China being the adversary, now we are seriously looking on the eastern front more than on the western front, which is rightly. Uh, we have to match up to the capability of the adversary. And what we have, that adversary is not, we can't just do away and just shy of that Himalayas will, ward all kind of, any kind of threat to us. So yes, we are on the right trajectory. Though what I see in the recent past, about 1.5 years, the trajectory has really gone up, which was important. For some time, I will say the trajectory was really low, or it had plateaued, but now it is going back again, which is very good for the industry as well, because the industry partners can now contribute equally, meaningfully, and be involved in the process of the security of the country, as well as the Indian Armed Forces requirements have also evolved over these years, because the technology on the adversary has also changed. They have also changed their approach towards intelligence gathering. So whether they are doing their intelligence operations, intelligence gathering operations, or whether we are doing it, it is a cat and mouse game. So you have to always have an advantage, and this trajectory is definitely required to be, keeping abreast with the technology. We have to maintain it. So I think we are on the right track, and the recent push by the government is extremely important in this, and we must continue on that.
Right, as you said, we have realized, of course, the policy point of view and also from the leadership point of view, that this is something we need to develop right here in India, in the spirit of whatever you call it, Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and then the whole thrust is there on our homegrown company, the Indian company, the startup, the industry basically, and its big ecosystem. Recent survey we talks about, we have about, say, 2.2 billion drones worth will require across armed forces, largely from armed forces, and then in the civilian space. In the whole ecosystem, then your company matters. You incubated at IIT, which we understand the best of the brightest of talents there. Where do you see yourself in this drone making in India, and how challenging for you, and what exactly you're doing? Just start with introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Manish, for actually inviting me to this panel, which has Group Captain Siddharth Malhotra and also Rohan. And rightly, to have a small introduction of what Endurer does. Endurer is a end-to-end aerial robotic solution provider. We, as a group of students and professors, have come together in order to address the end user requirements in terms of surveillance and also logistics delivery using drones. And our drones differentiate themselves from the market in terms of their capacities of endurance and payload capacity. And these have been addressing this problem using the niche technology, the state of art platforms like helicopter. If you see of one of our drones, it's a miniature helicopter which can fly for 2 hours, and it's a gasoline powered engine which actually minimizes the user like the battery charging problems in the field when you are operating at high altitude areas or in a very rough environments. The gust resistance, where is the capability is required higher in marine conditions also. And for the logistics delivery also, we have come up with a patented design biplane tail seater which can take off vertically and does this transition into fixed wing mode. It has advantages of both airplane and helicopter. So we have come up with design in IIT Kanpur. And coming back to the question where we see ourselves. So we see right now we are in a micro class category drone manufacturers. We intend to go into small category drones. That means the payload capacities of 40 kg and 50 kg to ranges of 100 kilometers, which will or 50 kilometers. Which these small category drones we feel will fill the gap of the current industry, the mid-mile deliveries in commercial applications, and also the mule drones requirement in Air Force and frontier posts, where they want to supply this ration or armaments from post to post, or where from the bottom of the hill to to climb a hill of like altitude of 2 kilometers. So that's where we feel the small category drones will play a major role. And by end of this financial year, we have intend to complete our product roadmap, a product development in order to meet that and enter the market with that. So we intend to see ourselves in the small category drone manufacturing area.
Right, as Rohan said, there's definitely two class of drones. For the civilian and military, requirements are altogether different. The complexity of the military drone is much higher, basically, and that's what our debate, discussion today. Having said that, we see again a lot of mushrooming of homegrown drone startups in India. Rather, also some of the mature industry, including your industry, also taking lead on that. But armed forces, often we have a discussion, there's a huge gap. What armed forces require, their primary role for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance are very complex of nature. They need high caliber military grade equipment, optics, and of course sensor incorporated. How do you look at the gap and how the industry is going? Do they understand and embrace what military requires? And if you can define the gaps which we have, and where should we look at, for the direction and for the guidance, especially for the startup in the drone ecosystem? To Siddharth.
Yeah, so I think it's a very pertinent question. So presently, what we need to see is matching of our industry to what are the requirements of the defense forces. There are gaps. We should be, magnanimous enough to accept the fact that there are certain gaps, and these gaps need to be filled. But I think those gaps have to be only filled only when we look into those gaps more in a detailed manner. For example, the avionics is one section where, while I am sure he will also agree, we feel the heat, like the chip industry presently is having a very serious issue. The supply chain and the time lag which is there, which is affecting the deliverables is a big gap. It's a big gap. Similarly, development of other components of the aircraft which are still not built in India. We are definitely on the path of Atmanirbharta, but then there are a lot of things which are yet to be built in the country. So we just hope and pray that these industries also come up and the industry supports that. Those technological gaps are to be filled. So it's mainly the avionics. Second, I would definitely come to the battery part. Battery is definitely evolving, but I think there is a lot of scope of work for development of the battery, especially for the quadcopter and multicopter kind of aircraft. There are different systems available, like he's talked about his product. There are products like that which support the aircraft power engine by adding a kind of hybrid engine where there is a battery and the battery being charged with another engine in it. So those kind of products are available and these are being developed in-house. That's a very welcoming thing. But these are the gaps which I feel definitely need to be filled.
Before we go deeper into that, Rohan, you have been the pioneer. Of course, Map of My India is a household name. Of course, in the navigation system, and this is one of the fundamental of drones, based on the global positioning system and other. Of course, we're also developing our own Navic. Could you define your latest in terms of technological breakthrough? What you're bringing here, and how it could impact the drone making in India, especially add value to our ecosystem, basically.
Yeah. See, we work with both the GPS chipsets as well as Navic chipsets. I think it's very important that India has almost every device, strategically speaking, almost every device, whether it's for IoT devices or even smartphones, and of course for drones, they must come with Navic kind of installed at a mandatory way. Because
Could you,
that,
for the larger audience, define
Sure,
Navic and
sure. So GPS, I think we are all kind of aware what GPS does. It helps us kind of locate ourselves. It helps machines kind of get the latitude, longitude, and other location or movement information for kind of where you are or where your equipment is. Now, Navic is India's own regional navigation satellite system. So whereas GPS has been built by the US in the late 60s, about 30 odd satellites that they operate, and that signal is received by GPS chipsets in different devices or vehicles, etc. Navic, on the other hand, is operated by ISRO, and hence the control of whether that signal is available or not remains with the Indian authorities. And so what happened in Kargil, one of the lacuna that Group Captain Siddharth was talking about, was GPS was denied in that area. And so a lot of our offensive or defensive kind of activities was hampered because there was no location awareness. So that's why I'm saying it's one very, very important, it's a very good breakthrough that the government and ISRO have kind of collaborated on to build NAVIC, because every other superpower like China or Russia or EU or even other large countries have built their own regional navigation kind of satellite systems. So that's kind of one. And so we've collaborated with ISRO on various applications of NAVIC chipsets. We worked on something for fishermen, so a civilian use case, so that they don't cross the maritime boundary. They get cyclone alerts. In fact, Honorable Prime Minister mentioned it in one of the Man Ki Baats long ago. We are putting NAVIC-based chipsets in vehicle IoT devices, so in the in-vehicle systems that are going. Plus, now drones are also increasingly being told, and many drones, especially the indigenous ones that where we have control on the R&D, are coming with NAVIC enabled. The other side that Mapindia has been working on is, a lot of the ground control systems or mission planners or the analytics software where you collect the data and try to analyze the Earth observation data or the surveillance data. The drone ecosystem or supply chain from this software technology side also has essentially till the last 1-2 years been imported or kind of repurposed from open source or what is globally available, because the ecosystem was very constrained, the industry was very constrained, there was no liberalization, which of course 15th August 2021 was a defining moment for the indigenous drone industry, where the government under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister kind of opened up this sector. But as a result of that initial constraint, a lot of these maps and data on which this mission control, ground control, analytics, etc. is happening, navigation is using the foreign maps or foreign imagery.
Right.
Now, this is also as critical a dependency,
That
just
defeats
like
the purpose
GPS,
itself,
that would defeat the purpose, because inadvertently we are leaving a digital footprint. Because every time we are planning a mission, it is on a cloud-based system of a foreign map, or our ground control system is showing us real-time feed. That data can be going to anywhere. So one of the things that Mapindia has done is through our MGIS 3D platform. It's completely an indigenous alternative to Google Earth. We have collaborated with ISRO so that all of ISRO's different types of satellite imagery and Earth observation data, which can not just tell you the optical imagery, but also tell you landslide data, also tell you heat temperature, also give you the 3D elevation, all of that is now integrated. So we're working with the drone manufacturers one by one. There is a inertia and time to switch, just like NAVIC is having its adoption curve. Even this indigenous maps, navigation capabilities, 3D data, imagery is being integrated into various parts of the drone manufacturing supply chain, the software element, I'm telling you. And I think the other thing that I want to credit the government with as a breakthrough was really the launch of Digital Sky as a platform, because that's the platform where everybody can see on an airspace map where the drones can fly, the green zones, and where they need permission, yellow zones, and where they should not fly, red zones. Now, slowly, as drones also start getting tracked, like the flight, ATC, that will also give more confidence as to kind of rogue drones not being flying. So that's a collaborative effort of the government and the industry to create this digital sky, digital platform around drones. So these are some of the things that we are doing.
Great, well explained. Group Captain, on this, what makes the drone? Of course, by definition, people say it is more of a software-led sort of, heavy initiatives, but you have the components, like key components like sensors, you have high caliber cameras, you have other computer vision, you have many other applications. So, and we have led on the software firm. India is proud of doing some of the great work in the software arena, what we call information technology, basically. Again, Dan, where we lag behind, if we have this capability, and where we see the new tools, like for example AI, data, machine learning Basically, it's all about unmanned systems. So how do you define it? I mean, again, back to the same fundamental questions. Is it a hardware-led innovation, or it is more of a software information technology-led development? What is actually the military drone is all about?
Okay, so I'll just break this into two parts. So any unmanned system is basically made of two components. One which flies in the air, what we see the aircraft, and second is the setup which is there on the ground, through which we control or manipulate the aircraft, and of course the different uses of that aircraft. So we have an airborne component and there's something which is ground-based component. Both the components are extremely important. Even if you send an autonomous flight, that means you just program the aircraft and it goes and flies and comes back. But even then, you need to have a ground-based setup. So on board the aircraft, there are different components in the aircraft also. So the aircraft system can be like in any aircraft. It will have a fuselage, an airframe with maybe a landing gear system on it. It will have a data transmitter which will relay its position and all those critical mission updates which are available, all the mission related data which is being relayed back to the control station, or it may be captured on board the aircraft itself. So these are different components of the aircraft itself. Now, if the aircraft has got different types of missions, and that aircraft can be configured basis the mission. So let's say if I just need to capture the imagery of a landmass, so what is the kind of sensor I'm going to use? Am I going to use only a day camera? Can I carry a infrared camera? If there is a requirement of carrying a laser payload, there is a requirement of designating a target with a laser, then I'll carry a laser-borne target payload. Then there is something called a synthetic aperture radar, which is a large area mapping device, which also covers something like an optical imagery, but which is different and difficult to actually interpret. But these are sensors which are available today. Then there are a lot of different other sensors which can be put on board the aircraft, like electronic sensors, electronic warfare sensors which can be put, where you detect the enemy emitters, what they are emitting, the kind of radars which the adversary would have deployed and they are operating. Whether a radar or an emitter is active or not, that can be detected by using these systems. Similarly, we have communication intelligence systems, where these systems detect the operation of the different communication systems being operated by the adversary. So these are various sensors, and there are many more which are now adding up to them, like LIDAR is one of them. A lot of other sensors which are NBC detection, nuclear, biological, chemical warfare. So any detection, any emission on NBC front can be detected by these kind of sensors. So it depends what is your requirement, what is the mission requirement, and basis that the aircraft can be configured into that mode. So these are different parts of the aircraft. And now on the ground-based setup, which we generally call as a ground control station, you will have a tactical display of where the aircraft is flying. So a lot of maps, a lot of aircraft parameters being relayed. The ground-based setup will display and it will offer interaction with the human element. That means the operator will operate this aircraft which is flying in air using this setup. So on that you will have different maps, different sensors which are giving the, let's say, the live video which we see. So airborne platform will capture those UAVs, the imagery which is being relayed and being viewed real time. And basis this real time video what is available, you can make a decision of what is your next action you have to do. So these kind of setups are there inside the ground-based setup.
But in true sense, then sensors are the key component basically, and that defines the whole roles of aircraft, also the level and size of unmanned system. And we understand we don't have the capability at large. We understand that we are absolutely importing it from lot many other countries. Of course, we have stopped importing from China, and military is no for China. But having said that, where we are we developing? Are we reaching to some point? Are we starting to begin in the direction that we are able to make, say, sensor, define our own sensor requirement and also unmanned system according to that? From the industry perspective, where we are, starting from the micro, if you can give us perspective to the bigger unmanned system, in the domain of medium range.
Yeah, Manish, you're very right on identifying the problem of the sensor-driven solutions. So drones, if you see, like 75% of the bill of materials come from the motors, batteries, camera payloads, especially, and the communication payloads. And out of this 75% in India, it's mostly 25% is the what value addition is being happening with indigenous companies or indigenous OEM manufacturers. And the primary reason for that is the lack of chips or lack of the core component which actually enables the OEM manufacturer to start building the subsystem like a camera sensor, let's say. And due to that, we have to import that the core component and start building our own subsystem. That's where the 25 to 40% valuation is happening, and that will actually be driven or like in the long run. That's where the companies like bigger companies are investing into chip manufacturing, and they are giving themselves 5 to 10 years of gestation period to break even the investment that's going now. Because yes, we are a bit late into realizing that and acting upon that, but we do are working like India as a manufacturing hub as working is investing into this manufacturing of these sensitive components so that that will enable the drone industry or multiple other industries to make the indigenous value addition, indigenous content of the components to much higher level than what it is right now. And that's applicable to all the categories of drones or all the subsystems. And that's coming to the avionics, the sense avionics, and the other things called motors and motors. That's where the rare earth metals comes into play. The lack of rare earth metals in India is something like we can't change that as of now. So, and there is one more bottleneck for this problem is the if you see drone industry, there are a lot of companies, a lot of OEM manufacturers, and everyone has their own design. And and if you compare any other industry, the commonality or the uniformity of the components or the materials is there, and which is like if I want motor manufacturer in India, if he starts manufacturing one component, he could able to manufacture only one type of motor for that particular company only, which is not able to give him the bulk order he is looking forward to make his investment gets his returns. So this is something we as an industry are trying to discuss it at multiple forums. What is the way forward? It does require some support from the drone manufacturers to these component manufacturers, and yeah, it's under discussion, as I can say.
So, Rohan, a little beyond the drone, of course, you travel this journey, right? You also face some of the problems. You had to import a lot of component for your devices. I understand. Could you add something to this? I mean, how did you face and how did you overcome these challenges? What we call making it more Indianized, and having your component, having your system built here, and something which could drone industry can attach and learn to.
Yeah, one of the things that we pride ourselves at MapMindia is that for 27 years we focused on indigenously building the maps and also the technology needed to build the maps. And as a result, we have technology. We have not just maps that we can sell to customers, but these technology solutions as well. So in that sense, we're advanced digital maps and a deep tech digital products company. And this was also born a little bit out of the necessity when in the late 90s, when we started creating digital maps, we realized two things. One is the foreign equipment, A, was very expensive, and B, also wasn't fine-tuned towards creating maps or, the sensors, collecting data for India's complex geography. So really a lot of innovation has happened when we are building standard definition maps or high definition maps in terms of creating our own kind of technology to collect or acquire, process, and publish such kind of data. Now, when it comes to the IoT side, we've also been in the IoT business for about now 11 years, where the IoT is a hardware-led solution, where you actually have to put a black box inside a vehicle, or you have to build an infotainment system which goes into the in-vehicle navigation system. And yes, to be honest, earlier we used to have specs for what these products were, and we used to depend on partners outside India to deliver to those specs, what are called ODMs. What is heartening to see in the last few years, and again, drone industry has gotten a specific boost because of what the government has done in terms of banning import of drones, but also in general, the government's push to encourage manufacturing, PLI, what he talked about in terms of the even the semiconductors. There is a lot of talent in India which knows how to design electronics and hardware. Now the phase is where people are designing their own products and platforms, and then they will set up the manufacturing lines, and then the point is on economies of scale, which also he talked about. So it is a journey India is on. Um, it starts with this commitment that we want to build our own solutions. There are companies like L&T who have for 50 plus years who have been building in India, working closely with ISRO, working closely with HAL. So we know there's a template, there's a playbook of very, very large companies, very, very now technology first companies in the recent years, and now this crop of startups that are coming, which tells us that in the next 1, 2, 3 years, more and more value addition and more indigenization, more and more Atmanirbharta will come to the hardware and software components for the drone industry and manufacturing at large. And this will be a great boost for defense, for sure, where this is a strategic sector. You don't want to be dependent on foreign imports of initial equipment and then be beholden to them for maintenance, which means that if your geopolitical equation changes or your compulsions change, yet you are constrained because you are dependent on equipment to be maintained which you had bought
Right.
30, 40 years ago. So it is happening. It is a bit slow but getting accelerated. So that's something to feel good about and keep pushing on.
Right. So one side you have a big company, I say big conglomerate defense company like Larsen and Toubro, who has some direction, who has a history of doing this, who has a very active interaction with armed forces. So industry understand basically. But if you see if you see the startup like in your air, with again I see the young bright guys, who are trying to do some breakthrough in the drone technology. Again, there's a gap. I point out, to Siddharth, Group Captain Siddharth, on this. For example, what armed forces needs is, for example, in Eastern Ladakh, things can get frozen. You need a very high quality frame. In Jammu and Kashmir, the different requirement there. There could be some places the wind is so high, the micro drones will just won't sustain basically. So how these guys will. Which direction they should go? Is it constant interaction with the armed forces? Do you invite these startups and give them some directions and throw some challenges on them to work upon that? Because they work in the silos and they come up with the solution and they come to armed forces because everybody wants to sell their drones to armed forces and say I can do this requirement, that requirement. But of course, armed forces not into charity. Armed forces has certain responsibility to protect the nation. They need certain kind of high caliber UAVs to do certain kind of specific tasks. So what is the way out, and where do you see again as per the gaps are there and how to address?
So, if you see how the Indian armed forces are now trying to support, you would have seen how the Indian startups have been really embraced by the Indian armed forces as of now. Whether you see Indian Army, Indian Navy, or Indian Air Force, you may just refer to Meher Baba competition, for example.
Right.
That was one of the competitions where a lot of startups got a boost of showing their caliber, their ability, what they want to do. That was a big platform where they got a chance to showcase their abilities. And as we see, like the latest update, what we got yesterday in that US 2022 seminar, this is going to stay. This approach will continue. So that's the Indian Air Force view. And similarly, Indian Army and Indian Navy is also on that same line. So they want the startups to come and support the requirements of the armed forces, and they have initiated many such measures like Meher Baba competition. There are many other ways. IDEX is another good example or platform where there's a good opportunity for the younger startups. They can come and demonstrate their ability, their capability, and contribute to the entire, how they can contribute for the equipment requirement of the armed forces. So these are certain measures which the Indian armed forces are doing, and I think it's the right way. Unless we don't embrace themselves, they are the talent for the future for the nation, and I think that's the right way. The armed forces are doing it in a very good manner. I feel that's the right way.
We understand that, of course, we have recently Indian Army inducting the swarms of drones, which is by the local homegrown company.
Yeah.
Again, but then having said that, there's a bigger category which we're talking about, the armed force versus we have what you call medium altitude drones and HAL high altitude drones, basically, which we absolutely no ground at the moment. We also understand the DRDO is working on Rustam and which is and the combat version which is called Ghatak. And again, we heard that in discussion yesterday. We are talking about importing those systems, because those systems fill the requirement which our domestic industry cannot, even we don't see from 3 for 4 years. How serious is that issues? And we again back to the same square, especially these capable drones. Is what is the problem then again? To Siddharth here.
So somewhere there has to be a balanced decision or a balanced approach which the armed forces need to do, and I think they are doing it in that manner. Uh, a justifiable gestation period is definitely required for the Indian industry to support the needs of the armed forces, but there definitely has to be a line drawn up to what time the Indian Defence Forces can keep waiting. So if the Indian industry is able to meet up to the requirements, that's the best which we can think of. But at the same time, the armed forces cannot compromise the need on the frontiers where we need the security apparatus to be in that level of readiness where we can match out to any kind of urgent requirement. So that balance has to be measured, and I think it's the balance right now is right. We are giving decent opportunity to all the young startups, and once the industry is able to contribute, this industry can take on. And in fact, the future is ours in that case, because this is a homegrown setup which can contribute even to the international market in future. So you are building economy in the way if this whole thing sets up like that. And these are the building blocks, or I'll say the baby steps which we are taking towards growing to that maturity levels.
But if our key agency, for example, DRDO, which is solely responsible and has so much of support budget and of course the direction to do that, been not been able to do some groundwork, especially in I won't say ground, but say the complete work at this point of time. Do you think private industry can take the space, especially in the HAL and mail category of drones, for the armed forces specific?
Yes, so I definitely think India has the capability. The talent pool which is existing in India is there. Yes, it may be challenging for the young startups to straight away jump into this larger class of aircraft, where I think the medium and the larger size industry players can pitch in much strongly into that. So larger companies can definitely build and invest into those kind of requirements. And our industry in that setup, in that sense, is also matured enough. We have good players of that magnitude who can pitch in that much of investment and take it ahead. And in the meantime, we will see these startups which we have seen growing now. They will also mature to those levels, and I'm sure they will be able to take it even further ahead.
But if you talk about, say, the big industry, the father of defense industry, the private industry I'm talking about, are they investing in the capacity? Despite having no orders, which is the visual concern of the armed forces, you need to have an order to scale up, to invest. Such a heavy amount of investment goes into research and development. I'm not quoting any particular company, but say the biggies of the Indian defense company, especially we have so much from the private company. You have Bharat Forge, you have Larsen and Toubro, you have Mahindra Defense, which is coming up a big way. But we haven't heard them from, especially in the drone system, basically. So do you think they are investing in the capacity and come up with a solution for the Indian armed forces?
So if you go through the spectrum of the young startups and their alliances and their partnerships and their support from the larger companies, it is existing even now. A lot of larger companies are supporting a lot of young startups. So they have the mindset and the innovative approach to solve the problem, which the startups have. And the biggies, as you say, they have the wherewithal to do that. So this is the ideal combination which is existing. If you go and explore the industry alliances, there are a lot of setups like that. There are a lot of companies, startups which have been supported by the large companies. So I think that's a healthy mix. That's a good sign of maturity of the industry growing, how you support the younger startups to mature into serious players. So,
and how long for you, Ramakrishna, take to mature, to come up to that level of unmanned system which could fit in the armed forces requirement in the category of, say, higher category of high altitude or medium altitude drones, doing some of the key and complex operations up in the sky?
Yeah.
Are you from you to micro to that level?
Yeah, Manish, before answer that, I just want to continue what Sir has started. Yes, there is a strong support, the strong synergy between the existing defense players and the new startup companies. And also, when you're talking about the hail and mail category drones, Sir is right to point out if the startup Indian industry is not delivering that to a level which is required for the armed forces can't keep on wait for a long time. And to address this in a shorter period, the ideal way, or the what's at least the fastest way, is to work on the technology transfer from the foreign OEM partners, and that can be manufactured or indigenous or customized according to the requirements in India. That's what happening, I think, with Adani and the Israeli Elbit company. So now the Hermes drones are being manufactured in Hyderabad. Like, is the manufacturing of that is being planned here. So to address that,
They're assembling the components, I
assembly,
understand, basically.
and that's a start that we should focus on, and thereafter the more indigenous value addition will come from that, and more partnerships with the indigenous startups can add value there, and we are on that route to increase the indigenous content, they call, in these male and hail categories also. And coming back to the what Endura is doing in the small category drones, we are completely designing and developing the whole drone at our facility at in-house, but it is taking our own 6 months to 10 months of time to complete one product development cycle of that class, and in order to go for the trials and demonstrations in order to deliver the product. And during this process also, any support from the existing players like L&T or Tata or Mahindra, so that will be helping startup like us to accelerate the process, and also to get the capital that is required to address multiple requirements. And one of your earlier question is also key. India has a very the geography of India is so diverse. The drone requirements required in Northeast is not the same that is required in Rajasthan. They require, and the same is not required for the marine conditions in West and East Coast. So all the units, all the services, tri services are looking for different drones with the different capabilities of. So that will help us to work or deliver multiple customized solutions to that can solve that particular user end user better than any other drone available globally.
Rohan, what do you take on this? Especially you contributed in, again, the very critical area. Of course, when armed forces required that, there's own system of navigation and positioning, which is so critical. And you know that in times today, you cannot trust. You should have your own robust system, especially in the military technology. Keeping that in the context, if you can point out what Ramashankar is talking about,
Yeah,
do we,
yeah.
we should give that much leverage and time again for armed forces because the requirement is immediate, or we should have some more, say, depth or given more budgetary allocation, government support, policy support, and wait for them.
Yeah, I'll draw the analogy of what happened in the automotive industry in terms of joint ventures between the foreign players and the Indian players, which really enabled India to become this amazing automotive hub. Huge amount of localization, and then a lot of export happening from India, and that gave the leverage to the large automotive OEMs to continue to invest in this space, and a lot of the large Indian OEMs or Indian partners have taken the lead. So I think where we do not have the technology, of course these joint ventures, technology transfer is the right answer, while of course you will have these young disruptive startups coming out of the research institutes or just through their own innovation doing some disruptive breakthroughs. And as Group Captain Siddharth said, I do think the armed forces are taking a very balanced approach, because yes, actually it has 10-20 years they have anyways been waiting, and they sorely need modernized technology. So in that sense, if they really have an urgent need, they'll have to go ahead with what is available today. But what I think that they're also doing is, in the last couple of years especially, I've seen very deeply and very proactively and continuously engaging with the private industry, sharing kind of what problem statements they have, sharing their user needs, so that people who were not earlier kind of aware, they're getting aware what is needed, and then the industry is building towards it. Now, what needs to happen, in my opinion, is the government does need to earmark some kind of investment. To spur, you have to kind of create a dislocation. You want to accelerate this indigenization of or Atmanirbharta. So a lot of R&D actually needs to be funded by the government. Typically what happens, if it's NCNC type of, you build it, if you can deliver to my spec, I will then do an RFP, and then you might get you might get selected, I think is quite risky and frankly not feasible for startups. They are capital constrained in any case. It might also feel a bit risky for the large companies because it's not like India on its own can be a very large bulk consumer. You have to kind of spur the industry, and if you really look at the total cost of ownership and the strategic kind of opportunity cost of depending on the foreign companies, I think India can allocate some amount of budgets to spur the R&D. And if they also had to do a long-term planning, maybe not sign extremely large, long contracts with the foreign players, because then you are locked in for 10, 20, 30 years. You've kind of, kick the can down 20, 30 years down. You take short-term contracts because then you have the optionality of those Indian companies who can support, in the next 2, 3 years they can get the business. And really, I think what the industry is looking for is, in next 2, 3 years, can we start getting orders and revenue from the defense? If that visibility is there, I think very people are very keen to invest because they see that defense will be a customer, then but also civil will become the automatic customer for some of the non translatable items, and then export market will become the customer. So I think maybe this is my
I think
suggestion.
we are wonderfully well highlighted. But one out of my own experience, recently happened to be placed, in one of the defense conference across the world in Portugal, which a company called Tekeva. So within the gap of 10 years, for starting from a very scratch, from zero, to develop a drone which could now is a part of the European Union and then doing the survey of whole Atlantic Ocean. So journey was short, and this is how it comes to, as you pointed out, we should have an open flow of technology. Of course, we are the learning stage, and we are also bridging the gap and catching up. I understand armed forces has certain liberty to import, but in civilian space, we have certain restriction. Basically, how do you look at, especially at this stage, we need to collaborate more with the best of the technology. We should have a joint venture or any sort of mechanism to embrace technology and also see how capable we are and what we are delivering with them. Any restriction from the armed forces in these directions, especially for the startup, where they can pick and choose, or how they can flow with technology, they can have a foreign partners. If you point out, in the larger context of ecosystem.
So I just want to clarify. I just need a clarification on a question. You are talking about the Indian startups. Any restrictions on collaborations with the Indian startups? Are you seeking
Indian
that?
and with the foreign startup, say for the foreign company, because they have the technology, the mature technology, and suppose they want to embrace that technology, and also in the military domain.
So definitely within the country there is no restriction. In fact, it is reverse. We want to encourage. The armed forces are definitely encouraging the Indian startups. So there is no embargo on getting into any collaboration. In fact, more proactive measures are being taken to embrace and take along the young startups in the country. So that's not a issue at all. With respect to the foreign OEMs and the foreign startups, definitely, as we all hear, Atmanirbharta. So we are looking more inside than outside. We are not looking more outside today. So, but yes, if there is something which is absolutely exclusive, I'm sure the Indian Armed Forces will take a view of that. And something on similar scale or something on similar magnitude can be identified, and how that can be, replicated, or similar thing can be done in India by our industry, then why not? That will be the first approach. If that is feasible, why not? If there is a dire need, okay, without this, the armed forces cannot proceed ahead, and there is a dire need that this has to be here. Obviously, there is no choice, there is no alternative available in the country, so the dire need will be addressed. So the Indian Armed Forces will take a very balanced view. They do not want to compromise the national security at any cost. At the same time, they have equal responsibility of letting the industry grow. So that is, I think, right now we are in that phase. The opportunity is being given. So I think that's a holistic view of it. And why not? If there is a dire need, let us take it from, even if required from the outside. But the first priority should be there if there is no dire need. And that's how the armed forces are dealing with it as of now.
So it's a global market, as you said. It's an Ernst & Young study you were talking about before the discussion is about $80 billion of the global market. We have potential to export worldwide. And the story is similar to other armed forces. I understand we're talking about, for example, Tejas I've been to HL, and one of the hallmark of Tejas is a composite material, which we take proud of. We could not be we could be importing engine, but some of the things we met is of top grade quality, is a lightweight composite quality. How do you see the if you see the highlight if you highlight the Indian drone industry, what we are best at, and what component we're best at? Of course, we have challenges. We don't have sensors. We are still working on a couple of key hardware components which we import from outside. So, what is the silver lining here?
So, in order to meet the global standards, so our solutions, like although we are bit on a backend for the sensor manufacturing, the solution that we are offering, be it in a micro class or a small class or a nano class, so that solution has to be like user friendly and also the cost effective, and also it has to address the problem in a very effective manner. So if we are able to do that when compared to global markets or their homegrown startups or their homegrown companies, I think we'll be given a chance to export. Like that's where the solution that we are making by the Indian startups should be able to meet the requirements. And I think we are trying to do that, and we are on the right track for that.
Rohan, finally, to address the large ecosystem, especially these startups, you say your system is to be integrated. Some of them you have already started. You have a vast scope from navigation, ground control, IoT, geospatial software. How do you address that? Like, I mean, there are so many to reach out, and how do they reach out to you, and what value you can add to them?
Correct. So, I mean, from Mapindia's perspective, we have been taking an ecosystem approach. So we've realized for quite a few years, of course, 25 years, that maps have infinite use cases across industries. But since a few years ago, we realized that drones is kind of this next generation. Again, there's a horizontal platform, infinite use cases, and in many ways, it's quite interlinked with our industry, maps, geospatial, IoT, which maybe is not apparent on the outward, but at least we had this vision. So what we said is that we must work with almost every drone company in some capacity or the other, because our customer base is multi-industry. We have 2,000 enterprise customers, defense, civilian, automotive, enterprise, banks, insurance, mining, etc. So, to drone manufacturers, we've been saying you can get indigenized solutions around maps or mission control software or ground control software or APIs or this geospatial analytics or IoT. We've been telling that drone manufacturers that look, we are offering solutions to the end enterprises around drone-based surveillance or drone-based mapping. So we want to procure your drones so that we can fly and operate them. We also cooperate with drone solution providers. Together, we can provide a system integrated solution. We've also been investing in and funding different drone startups because capital is a constraint to them, providing them with business arrangements that help them kind of deal with the capital constraints or the market access to whatever extent that we have a market access or a market position. So in that sense, and how do we kind of innovate? We sit on with DFI, Drone Federation of India. We've created a drone innovation fund where people can kind of apply to our program. We will fund them, etc. We participate in the industry events. We're quite available whenever somebody wants to get in touch with us. And it's been very interesting, even working with colleges like BITS Pilani. We created a drone-based metaverse for the entire campus. So we flew drones, we created the full 3D digital twin of that. It created a lot of excitement amongst the BITS students, faculty, as well as alumni who are in different industries. So showcasing this through our Mapples app and platform so that more and more people became aware of the more and more use cases around drones. I guess this is kind of our contribution and our effort, because we think that this is going to be a massive industry going forward. I mean, if automotive has been a large industry, we think drones is this new class of vehicles which has potentially, I mean, whether it's, we haven't even talked about toys and kind of gadgets. But if you really look at the recreational plus civilian, economic, military, defense, I think this is the technology for the future. And, in our own limited capacity, but with our commitment, we would love to kind of push this industry forward. And I think the government, from the top down, I think the drone sector opening up is a straight correlation with the Prime Minister's kind of understanding and commitment to drones, geospatial, and space. This trinity of strategic technologies. He himself talks about it, and that's kind of put a thrust on this industry. And I think the industry is doing a wonderful job. This is exciting phase.
And of course, it's a threshold. But again, do you think the government policies, especially for the armed forces and from the Ministry of Defense perspective, we are putting that much first? The fund in the research and development, especially for the armed forces and in the ecosystem, or do you think there should be a upgrade of such policies, encourage more startup? Even IDEX has a very limited fund. Is it sufficient to reach to that level? While world we are going ahead, we are talking about unmanned and manned teaming, especially that concept where aircraft can fly with unmanned can do more difficult operations, which will not harm our aircraft, our systems, still personnel. Your word on that?
So what as of now, what we have, there is a handholding by the government, by the Ministry of Defense towards the startup and the industry. But yes, I do agree to some extent that there is a dearth of resources, funds for certain R&D projects. And I think it can be enhanced. It depends on the economy of the country, how much we can. There is a requirement, and if there is a scope of doing that, I think that should be addressed. If there is a availability of more funds, and I think the startups are doing extremely well on that front, and if they are supported by those R&D funds, it will be a boost. It will be a big boost. I think it can be slightly enhanced, definitely. So ITEX or TDF, those modes are there. But yes, as you said, the cost of, as you rightly brought out, the bill of material, these are huge. If you see the dependency on a lot of equipment from the outside the country, that's huge. That's the major part. So even if you have to experiment, if the startups need to experiment something, there has to be some handholding, and the limited funding which is there does help. But I think if we can get more, it will be better.
And rightly so. With young and bright startup, who of course don't go to greener world, they remain here. They are courageous enough to do research, and bring out certain solutions for the country, and of course, a difficult path ahead. What is the message for them? Especially you, since you have proven you tested your ground, Rohan. Yeah. So, message for them, and largely to stick it to and keep innovating.
I mean, I would 100% encourage young Indians, young technologists, young scientists, young entrepreneurs to build in India, for India, and then from India for the world. This is the time where we have to build deep tech products and platforms in India. I think nobody can kind of compete with India's talent and tenacity. I think India has now evolved where it's a country who has an aspiration and capability. So my message is 100% stay in India, build in India. There's a strong market out there. Believe me, 25, 27 years ago, when my parents started and had this idea that, we will create digital maps for India, people used to call them crazy. That what do digital maps mean? There was no understanding in 1995, but they said, no, we want to build something for India. It will take us 10 long years, but we'll build it. And I think last year our IPO happened. I think it was 155 times subscribed. The public market made us a geospatial unicorn, India's first. So I can say that, building in India, building a business in India can be a long journey, but it can be a very fulfilling journey in all respects, not just economically or financially, but also the fact that we are doing this for our country and making it Atmanirbhar and Sarvottam. So please do innovation in India. Please keep doing the good work you are doing. I think L&T is inspiration for us as companies and for startups. So I think this is a great moment in India's history.
And one more question, do you think out of this inspiration that down the line you'll be able to fly your drones along the Tejas or Tejas Mark II or our AMCA, which will be coming up? How confident you are?
I'm 100% confident on that. I don't have any doubt in 2 to 3 years down the line, our drones are across defending our borders and maybe our friendly neighbors also, friendly kind of partners. So there is no doubt in that, and we are there, and the kind of support and the kind of the direction that drone industry as a collective is going, the startups and the private companies or the small and big companies, the way they are supporting and they're infusing the capital into this drone industry, from be it Reliance or Adani's or Tata's. So it's happening, and it just needs some time to show the result, and we'll be there, no doubt in that.
To Group Captain, last word. If it is imperative that we stop thinking about and having absolutely no import drone policies, at least, and we think down the line 5 years, this should be applicable. How we look at
So
based on the discussion.
yeah, so I had actually earlier brought out, there is a gestation period. That gestation period is right now happening. The moment this period is there, industry will be delivering, and I am seeing it happening. So I am sure the industry will be able to deliver, and obviously not at the cost of the security of the nation. That is the final line. So anything, whatever we do, even the industry needs a security. We as a nation need security. So that is paramount. If that is addressed and there is any kind of immediate threat, whatever needs to be done, the armed forces will do it. So if there is something which is available in the nation, why not? That should be the first priority, and that is how we are going. So I will still say security of the nation is paramount. That is the underlying statement. So, and yes, if the industry can do it, that's the best. That's the best option.
I would conclude that industry is breaking grounds. If government policy, right first, budgetary allocation, and research and development combined with industry, and of course with the hand-holding of armed forces, DRDO, it will be game-changing for India. We will not have to import. We will take a lead and be with the ecosystem and hub of the global drone making in India. Thank you very much.